You know, sometimes I feel like Bruce Campbell isn't given enough credit in his acting career. I know everyone remembers him for his great one-liners and comedic moments, but I think he delivers dramatic scenes with such sincerity to a point where it's almost surprising. Though we don't get to see it too often, it does come up, especially in Evil Dead. The story of Ash Williams in the Prime timeline is perhaps one of the most tragic I've ever seen for a fictional character. A man with his whole life ahead of him has his entire future stripped away in roughly 2 days, left to wallow in his own failures and misery until 30 years later, where he's called back to a thankless job. In this new video series, I want to lay out my thoughts and talk about different characters in the Evil Dead series, how they're characterized, what they go through, and my overall thoughts on them. I figured, what better characters to start with than the famous Ash Williams? So, without further ado, let's talk about one of the most tragic heroes I've ever seen in fiction. When you put into perspective how much Ash has grown since his original movie, it weighs on you how many traumatic events he was forced to endure just to merely live his life. In the first film, Ash is a mild-mannered and soft-spoken guy. He's mostly perceived as the dork or nerd of his friend group. He's scared of everything and unsure of his own capabilities. But in that same film, he matures into a warrior, desperate to survive and cling on to life. Ash's first arc in the series is self-contained in this film, which is his evolution from a nerdy dork into a heroic survivor, playing heavily on the final girl trope of the time. He's able to defend himself from the evil and make it out alive just barely. However, that came at the cost of everyone else dying around him. This is the start of Ash's tragic story. In a single night, he lost his sister, his girlfriend, and two of his best friends. He was forced to either adapt or die, and well, luckily he adapted in time. Bruised and battered, he made it out of the film alive only to BAM! Be attacked by the evil again. This directly carries over into Evil Dead 2, where Ash is thrown through the forest and is then possessed by the evil. It's all thanks to the sun and luck that he got out of that situation with his soul still intact. Let me tell you, it does not get better from here. Forced to kill his girlfriend for the second time, forced to cut his own hand off and feel all the pain surrounding it, had to fight his own hand to a point where he went mad, and then immediately get his head bashed in by some random people who came out of nowhere. You know, even though he did shoot one of them in the arm. Whoops. After Linda dies the second time, this technically ends Ash's first arc in the series, where he's left with nobody left. He started the story a pretty mild-mannered guy who would have gone on to have a lovely little life, but at this point, what's really left for him? Side spoilers for later in the video, but I think the background knowledge we know now about Ash going back to his hometown, only for everyone to think he killed his loved ones and friends, speaks volumes about how the evil screwed up his entire life. It's kinda heartbreaking to rewatch these movies knowing there is no happy ending for him. After everything he did to try and survive, to live the rest of his life, knowing that it was all for basically nothing just adds another layer of sadness. However, now we have Ash's next big arc that carries from the halfway point in Evil Dead 2 over to Army of Darkness and even leak out a bit at points of the TV show. His savior complex. With this new group of people, Ash is now an experienced survivor with a much more grizzled outtake on fighting through the evil. That means he now has a chance to actually save somebody where the night before he failed. That being said, I don't think every choice Ash makes in this movie is a perfect one. For example, going right for the fire axe and killing Dead-Eyed Ed, good decision. It might have traumatized Annie, but he rose to the occasion and did what had to be done. But just straight up telling Jake that Bobby Joe is dead after she runs out of the forest with no way to soften the blow probably wasn't the smartest choice. Like, I get it. He was, that same night, just forced to murder his girlfriend for the second time, but I wonder if he was a bit more compassionate and understood what Jake was going through and tried to relate to him, maybe he wouldn't have turned against him and Annie. Then, subsequently, all of the people that Ash had a chance to save were killed off one by one. At the very end, Ash watches the last living survivor, Annie, die by his own evil hand. It's so much more potent that it was the evil hand that delivers the final kill, because just before that, he's able to save Annie from Henrietta. He was finally able to actually save someone, only for that to be ripped away from him. Annie being the last living survivor just makes it sting even more, as these two aren't even romantically interested in each other, having both recently just had their partners brutally killed. She was just someone trying to survive, just like Ash, and he failed her. leaving him the last survivor, alone again, for the second time. As for Ash in Army of Darkness, I always saw his apparent goofiness and writing inconsistencies to just be him fed up and done with the whole situation. He goes through 2 nights of hell only to be shoved backwards in time and spit out during the age of knights and swords. He failed so many people, he's basically lost all faith in himself and just wants to go home. That's why so often he's always talking about just making it back home and forgoing any connections with others in the time period. He does end up freeing Henry the Red and his remaining men as well, but he's still on a one-track mindset to get back home. However, after Ash screws up with the book, you can see a bit of weighing guilt, and after Sheila is taken, you can kinda see the leak of Ash's savior mentality as he unites everyone to fight against the Army of Darkness, leading them in the fight. But for the first time ever, it works! Ash actually does end up saving Castle Kandar, Sheila, and he even unintentionally unites the Northlands with Lord Arthur. This is the first ever time that Ash was actually able to save people, and you can see in his face he feels pretty good about it. But of course, there's a stinger. Ash still has to leave and go back to his time, so even though he saved all these people, he doesn't even get to enjoy it. To be fair, however, he could have stayed. Why he wanted to go back to his time is kinda beyond me. He could have settled down with Sheila and had a life in that time period. Heck, in a couple alternate timelines, he actually does settle down with her. But no, as we all know, at the end of the film and the original trilogy, we see Ash fighting in his S-Mart job against the last Deadite. Of course, this is still the happy ending we all remember, but I want to get a bit speculative as we move into Ash vs. Evil Dead territory. With the new context we have about Ash after this movie, I have a feeling that Deadite he fought in his own time is a foreshadowing to his life after this. He's subsequently fired from his S-Mart job, his whole town and own father hates him, and for years he lived in a trailer hooked up to his car, going from trailer park to trailer park, working at value stops just to make ends meet. Even though the evil didn't actually send Deadites after him during this time, I think it's an allegory that Ash will never be done fighting the evil. It has ruined his entire life, and even though he did get a small victory in 1300 AD, he had to leave it all behind and go back to his time. I always wondered if Ash during these years between Army of Darkness and Ash vs. Evil Dead thought back on his decision, on if he should have stayed in that time period. We have now made it to Ash vs. Evil Dead. This is where Ash loses the most and has some tragic lows, but also becomes the lovable moron we all love. So let's go through some of these losses quickly. After accidentally releasing the evil again, Ash then got his new love interest killed, had to come face to face with the Deadite version of his girlfriend again, and even had to fight the clone grown of his old evil hand. Again, it's potent that it's the evil hand clone that ends up killing Amanda. Once again, Ash is denied happiness by the evil, using his own flesh and skin to do it. I know people are mixed about the ending of the first season, but I always saw this as Ash trying desperately to save the people he loved, just once, and to actually keep them safe. He saved Pablo and Kelly at the beginning of the season and fought alongside them, and now he was about to watch people he cared about die again because of him. So of course he made the deal with Ruby. Was it smart? No, not really, but at this point, he was desperate to keep them safe under any means necessary. But of course, as we know in Season 2, it comes back to bite him. He loses his father, his best friend, and is tormented by, well, to be honest, the best villain we've ever gotten, but that's for another time. The point is, Ash just keeps suffering throughout these seasons. Almost like the evil just keeps pushing back that he's never allowed to have a happy life and to keep people close to him. Because everyone he's ever been around gets killed or possessed by the evil. He can't form relationships, he can't find a nice girl, he can't even have a drink without somebody getting hurt. And at the end of Season 3, we have Ash's best scene. Honestly, I think this is my favorite scene from Bruce Campbell in general. It's where, for the first time ever, Ash just lets everything go. His insecurities, his feelings, everything. It's all established in one simple line.
You know what? I got news for you. I didn't ask for this.
Ash, at this point, is at his lowest. Because despite all the fighting, all the attempts to keep the people he loved safe, and all the hardship, he is still forced to suffer through everything, usually with a big goofy smile on his face to mask his true feelings. But this time, the smile is gone. He's done. Not done in Army of Darkness in that sense. Done with himself. He was forced into a job and life he never asked for, going through loss after loss just to try and save people that aren't even thankful or respectful to him. This right here is where the analysis comes from. So many times I hear people say that this series is just too silly to take seriously, and yes, I totally agree that sometimes it does play its cards a bit too goofy. But I also think the writers had a purpose in making Ash so much more comedic than he was before in this TV show. Ash uses a dumb smile or flashy move to hide the fact that he doesn't want to do this anymore. He's trapped in a life he doesn't want, and the old saying people have is true. It's not an Evil Dead story without him being screwed over in some way. But that's not to say his entire life is one tragic mess with no happiness to be found, because there is some. This is where I want to talk about how the TV show elevated his character to a higher level of depth. It's all because of his co-stars. The additions of Pablo and Kelly as new main characters was probably the best decision they could have made for this TV show. It doesn't come off like they're trying to introduce a new generation. Rather, they want to add on to Ash's story while developing new, fun characters. They've gone through similar experiences of loss like Ash and have something they can relate to. He can guide them while still being their equals, and they also reel him in if he acts a bit too Ash. The duo ground him and give him something to keep fighting for, a family that he can call his own that makes it through the fight. Kelly and Pablo are the most iconic Evil Dead characters next to Ash himself after all, but honestly, the best addition we've had is still Brandy Barr in Season 3. It sucks that we only got 3 seasons of Ash vs. Evil Dead, but as a semi-ending to another one of Ash's arcs, I think that it does well. An ongoing theme in the Evil Dead series, not just the TV show, has been Ash's family. I mean, in the movie where this all starts, it's his sister that's taken first. Then there's all of his love interests and his father later on. Brandy in Season 3 is the last living member of Ash's family left. Just like everyone else, she does bite the dust. But this time, Ash doesn't let her go. He actually saves her soul and keeps his daughter safe, even inspiring her to fight back against the evil herself. It would have been so easy for them to set up Brandy as the next Ash Williams, his next of kin that would carry on his legacy after his eventual death. But that's not what's been done. Instead, Brandy served a different purpose. She's the one who lifts Ash up when he's at his lowest. She's integral to the story because by the time of Season 3, Ash has completely lost faith in himself, considering himself a failure of a savior. But after an entire season of seeing her father try to explain what's been going on, only for her to run away in fear, finally, Brandy believes not just what he's been telling her this whole time, but believes in him as well. She believes that the things he's done and the lives he's saved make him a true savior, and she wants him to keep fighting. It's just like she said.
Please don't let me down now.
This right here is the most important moment of the entire show. This is what it's been building towards. Ash has waited his whole life for someone to validate and appreciate what he's been doing. He hasn't gotten it from the people he saved or from his father. And now, his daughter is giving him the belief that he hasn't had it himself for so long. Thus, Ash gets back up and continues to fight the evil. As bummed as I am that we have yet to get a proper conclusion to Ash's story, Season 3 is probably the most positive Ash has been since Army of Darkness. He got to make up with his father's ghost, he reconnected with his daughter, saved his hometown, kinda. Overall, this was a fitting end to Ash vs. Evil Dead. It closes off this era while also leaving the door open for new adventures. So what do I think about Ash's character? Well, I do think at the beginning he was meant to be rather simplistic. At the time, there weren't many final survivors of horror movies that were deemed the final boy. Instead, they were mostly the well-known final girl. He already subverted the trope, and throughout the films and TV show, we got to see how he evolved, going from a soft-spoken, mild guy to a man of action with experienced chops, to a hero from the sky who saves an entire time period, to a washed up old man who still has a few tricks up his sleeve. It's obvious in the film trilogy that the writers didn't fully know what to do with Ash post The Evil Dead. They just kinda threw things at the wall and hoped they stuck. Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness Ash at times feel like two distinctly separate characters, until the peak of AOD where Ash has his big heroic moment, emulating the more grizzled Evil Dead 2 Ash. Ash vs. Evil Dead, in comparison, seems to have been the perfect storm. It mixed all of the character traits that Ash has had throughout all three movies while also inventing some new ones to create the Ash that everyone seems to remember. I know now with the new movies they've moved away from having Ash as a main protagonist, and for the most part, I'm fine with that decision. Developing likable new main protagonists isn't a bad thing. For the most part, I think Mia and Beth are good new main characters to follow. Nowhere near the level Ash was, but they're very good. It's a plus that this series has no bad protagonists so far. However, it's no wonder why people want Ash back now more than ever, especially after how he was portrayed in the TV show and the success of Evil Dead the game. It's because Ash is just so much fun to watch. He's an idiot and has bad things happen to him around every turn, but people still enjoy watching him because despite all of it, he gets back up and puts on a goofy smile with an awesome quip and blows evil up. I do want to close out this video with an idea I had reading context clues from the series. I think Ash in Ash vs. Evil Dead is using his smile and goofy tone to mask how inside he's really hurting. His interactions with Deadite Linda's head, the loss of his friends close to him, the entire episode where he's in the psych ward, and of course, the famous breakdown scene. These are all moments when the mask drops and we get to see how he actually feels inside. A hurt, broken man who lost almost everything. A man suffering from guilt of what he could have done almost 30 years ago and only continues to lose more as time goes on. But despite that, he doesn't stop fighting. He always puts on a smile and gets back up in the fight every single time, even when he needs a bit of uplifting. He started out being written like a basic horror protagonist, evolved into a man of action fighting against evil, and then was perfected in the TV show with more retroactive depth than I ever could have hoped for. So yeah, Ash is a pretty great character, and I do hope we get more of him. But the real question is, what about all the other characters in Evil Dead? Well, my hope is I can go into depth with more of them over time, so we'll have to find out together. Like this video, and if we get to say around 50 likes, I'll start writing the next script for a character breakdown just like I have here. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Go check out my other content if you haven't already. I'll make sure to see you all later. Bye bye!